Hi, I'm Stephen Garvey, founder, leader of National Citizens Alliance of Canada, NCA. Thank you for joining me here tonight. This is part one of 5 parts on NCA's immigration plan for Canada. Tonight, I'm going to be focused on national security. In the other parts, I'll be looking at cultural security, economic, humanitarian, and citizenship. So these will be over the next 2 weeks. Immigration is a really, really big topic. It's having a big impact on Canadians, on our country, on our future, the future of our children. Spending 30 minutes in a speech is insufficient, negligent. It's going to take us 5 parts to go through it so you, the Canadian people, can understand the issues around immigration and NCA solutions. And we encourage you to compare them to the mainstream parties. There's some serious threats facing Canadian people through immigration. And that's what we're going to discuss tonight. And when we talk about national security when it comes to immigration, what we're referring to, and this is our immigration policy statement, we're referring to preventing the entry of persons who pose a security threat to Canada. Persons who pose a security threat to Canada. So that's what all the national security aspect is about. Now I'm going to discuss some serious security threats related to this pertaining to the Canadian people, and then I'm going to go into our solutions. The first one, and probably the most significant one, and you will never hear this from the mainstream parties, is the communist Chinese infiltration of Canada through immigration. There was a CSIS report in 1997, Operation Sidewinder, which documented this infiltration. It was buried by the Chrétien Liberal government, and it's been suppressed and not talked about in the mainstream media since. This is a grave national security threat to the Canadian people, our prosperity, our well-being, our security, without question. This is the gravest threat. This report, Operation Sidewinder, we have a video that goes into detail into Sidewinder. But for tonight, this is about, it shows detailed real estate, corporate, communications, and political infiltration into Canada by Communist China. I'm going to read a quote now which will give you the breadth of this. And it's a very, very good quote, and you will understand the issue better. Quote, "These activities include money laundering, heroin trafficking, and the transfer of economic, high technology, intelligence data to Beijing. Sidewinder alleges the corruption of the Canadian business and political establishments." Quote, "The triads, the tycoons, and Chinese intelligence have learned that the quick way to gain influence is to provide finance to the main political parties." And that's what's going on without question with these main political parties. We actually documented it. Liberal, conservatives, you name it. China has obtained access to influential figures who are now and once were active at various levels of Canadian society. Foremost among the Chinese tycoons, according to the Sidewinder report by CSIS, is Li Ka-shing, of whom U.S. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher has testified, quote, the U.S. Bureau of Export Affairs, the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, the Rand Corporation have identified Li Ka-shing and his company, Hutchison Whampoa, as financing and serving as a conduit for Communist China's military, for them to acquire sensitive technologies and other equipment. Close quote. Last year, Forbes estimated Mr. Li's family as the 8th richest in the world, with total assets totaling US $10.6 billion. According to the Sidewinder report, Mr. Li is director of the Beijing-controlled China International Trust Investment Company, CITIC, which had 1997 assets of US $23 billion. CITIC owns and controls Cathay Pacific Airlines, Hong Kong Telecom, Star TV, Poly Technologies, Norinco, suspected of arms shipments to Mohawk reserves. Mr. Li's company, Hutchison, owns 49% of Husky Energy. CITIC has invested $500 million to buy Canadian companies, Selgar Pulp Mill, Nova Corp Petrochemical. Mr. Li and his son own at least 1/6 or 1/3 of downtown Vancouver and have extensive real estate holdings in Toronto. CITIC has developed close business links with Power Corporation. Andre Desmarais is linked to Chrétien. The Power Corporation has strings on every single PM since the 1970s, and they're linked to all these mainstream parties in Ottawa, you name it, multi-controlled opposition. Power Corporation is tied to globalist elites, the UN Agenda 2030. Go look up their website, Power Corporation. You will see that they endorse UN Agenda 2030, which Harper adopted and is being implemented across Canada. Do the fact check. You will see all these career mainstream politicians are tied to the Power Corp, which ties them to Communist China and this infiltration. So this is the number one national security threat through immigration. Mistake not. And that was in 1997. Over 20 years later, imagine how bad it is now. Imagine how bad it is now. Another threat is radical extremism, radical Islamic extremism. And we can look at Hizbut Tahrir, situated in Mississauga, Ontario, who support a world caliphate on implementing Sharia. They hold conventions every year. There's imams in Canada who are advocating for implementation of Sharia. This isn't made up. According to Montreal-based terrorism expert Marc Le Buis, he says radical extremist infiltration of government and Canadian security services is a fact. These radical extremists are already in government. We can see them, some of them as MPs, some of them working within the bureaucracy. Others have infiltrated Canadian security services. This is troubling. Tom Quiggins warns about Canada being used as a base for terrorist attacks against the U.S. And he provides a lot of fact. We all know about the Islamic Party of Canada, Islamic Party of Ontario. We know about ISIF operatives, other radical extremists in Canada, like the Edmonton terrorists who entered under Harper, ended up driving a U-Haul into Edmontonians, then tried knifing a police officer. We know about the Danforth attack in July of 2018, 2 women were killed, 13 injured, covered up. Islamic activists deemed mentally ill. Those are only some examples. More threats through immigration. MS-13 gang is crossing the southern border. Other gangs, triads, Asian, Russian, you name it, are entering through weak immigration screening protocols. New immigrants now, and this is a fact, it's based on a report out of Simon Fraser University, and we've done the updated calculations, that new immigrants are taxation negative to the tune of $40 billion a year, and that means that they're consuming more services than taxes paid to the tune of $40 billion. However, we will deal with that negative economic impact in our economic part of the immigration policy. That will be part 3, so we're going to get into that. But we view that as a national security threat when our financial well-being, our prosperity is under attack. But we're going to reserve it for the economic aspect. UN Agenda 2030, which is being implemented, it supports open borders agenda. This is troubling, and this is part of this national security threat. NCA will withdraw Canada from UN Agenda 2030. We're the only federal party registered that is committed to withdrawing Canada from UN Agenda 21 and UN Agenda 2030. Another threat is the expansion and growth of ethnic enclaves, most notably in places like Brampton, Vancouver, Montreal, Mississauga, Calgary, Edmonton, on and on. If we're assuming these will follow the path of Europe and they will lead to no-go zones. However, we will deal with the enclave issue in part 2 on cultural security. We're not going to deal with that now, but you could view that as a national security threat as well. And finally, through the mass immigration, there is a replacement of Canada's traditional population. This is a fact. However, we will deal with this, and we view this as a national security threat as well, but we will deal with it in part 2 in cultural security of immigration policy, our immigration policy. I'm going to turn to our solutions now, and I'm going to go through them so you're very clear on what the NCA will do in government to help you, the Canadian people. And we want your feedback as well. National security. So this is all about keeping Canadians safe, and it requires discriminating between persons who pose a threat to Canada and those who do not. We have an obligation in service of the Canadian people to make those who are coming here to harm us, that they do not enter the country. The first thing NCA will do is implement a moratorium with no end date on immigration to deal with national security issues, including the backlog, inadequate vetting, chain migration, and illegal migration. NCA will put a halt to immigration, and we will sort this mess out that's been going on for decades, and decades under these mainstream parties. This moratorium has no end date. Once we sort it out, we will go forward in the best interests of the Canadian people. We're the only party, registered federal party in 2019 that supports a moratorium on immigration. Second, we will limit immigration, including refugees and chain migration, to a maximum of 50,000 total immigration per year. That is our max ceiling on immigration into Canada. We believe immigration should be a supplement to natural growth of Canada's population, which, incidentally, is growing 294 per day new Canadians. We do not believe immigration should be a replacement. We believe it should be a supplement. And we are committed 100% to 50,000 or less. Canada's prosperity is declining. We are becoming less productive, which is impacting our prosperity and security. It means as individuals per capita, we are producing less. This mass immigration is not helping. We need to become more productive as Canadians, and we believe we will through our immigration plan and other plans. Third, we will ensure that systems of due process are in place for individuals entering from not from a safe country. So these are people who are fleeing for their lives from a particular country. And we will provide due process within limits. Remember, NCA supports 50,000 or less. If we're at the ceiling, they will be referred to another country. This is all about Canadians first. We're not a charity to the world. We believe in helping our people first, and we will help those within our means. But we will not go above 50,000. We will amend the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act 2001 to the effect that undocumented legal migrants will be deported immediately to their country of origin. Also, we will distinguish in that act radicalized families from non-radicalized families. And we will apply the NCA integration screening protocols for newcomers to Canada. And we have another policy on integration. We encourage you to look at it. But the bottom line, NCA has zero tolerance for illegal migrants. We will work with the U.S. We will not accept any from there. We will amend that act. We will not let them in our country. They will come in legally. Only legally. That's our policy. We will amend the Safe Third Country Agreement to the effect that illegal migrants in transit through the U.S. to Canada who arrive in Canada legally will face deportation immediately to their country of origin. We will deny entry of deported applicants from the United States, and we will distinguish radicalized residents from non-radicalized residents. Again, the NCA supports zero tolerance for illegal migrants. We will close the gaping holes in Quebec and Manitoba where they're streaming through. This is unacceptable. If we don't have borders, we don't have a country, and we will enforce the borders. We will implement a moratorium on sanctuary cities in Canada to gather all relevant facts with the intent to shut them down. We don't think there should be sanctuary cities in Canada harboring illegal migrants and criminals. These sanctuary cities, we will do everything in our power to shut them down. And if we can't shut them down, if any illegal migrants get in and we can't get rid of them, they're going to these sanctuary cities. But we will do everything in our power federally to shut down these sanctuary cities who are harboring legal migrants, people who have broken the law, some of which are criminals, gang members, thugs. NCA will deport individuals charged, convicted under criminal code upon completion of their prison sentences. If no prison sentence, then the individual will be deported immediately. We have zero tolerance for criminals coming into our country. It's automatic deportation. We will refuse entry to any individual previously deported due to criminal convictions. So we will not allow them to try to get back into Canada. We will deport individuals failing to appear at their immigration hearings. Affording one appeal to individuals within 90 days of the initial ruling as part of due process. We will maintain the constitutional requirements for citizenship and reject any measures that expand citizenship without right to vote to foreign investors and global passport. Canadian sovereignty must and shall prevail over globalist agenda. And that particular policy pertains to Chinese migrants coming in, foreign investors, and this whole notion of a globalist passport. We do not support that. We will reject that at every turn. We will dedicate innovative, more efficient methods to monitor employers' compliance with immigration and refugee regulations derived from policies and set out in programs in order to protect Canadians and the integrity of the immigration and refugee system. There's a lot of abuse going on. A lot of fraud going on with immigration. We're going to clamp down on that. We will enforce immigration and refugees regulations derived from policies and set out in programs by way of investigating and levying penalties where necessary on individuals, organization, employers, party to non-compliance. Again, we're going to crack down on the immigration corruption. It's a huge industry. There's a lot of money changing hands. We're going to clamp down on it. This is most important, and we're nearing the end of this. We will restrict, suspend indefinitely immigration rights to individuals from nations prone to terrorism activities and or have values and beliefs that are diametrically opposed to our own values and beliefs, and or unable to provide credible security clearances for applicants, while allowing political asylum seeker applicants from these nations. This is very important. We will not allow these nations that are prone to terrorism to bring their people into our country. We will shut that down. We will restrict or suspend indefinitely immigration rights to individuals from nations that fail to accept individuals deported back to them, while allowing political asylum seekers. Now, most important here, applying comprehensive screening for all applicants wanting to come to Canada, including the vetting of applicants' ideological beliefs and values that are counter to the standards of civil rights and liberties. Ideological screening would be applied to applicants before entering Canada to avoid charter issue. We will push to amend the charter to allow ideological screening of all in-Canada applicants as well. We will toughen up the screening. It will include ideological screening. If you're coming in with values and beliefs that are counter to our civil rights and liberties, you will not be allowed to enter. Period. This is just common sense. We're the only federal party running in 2019 that supports these ideological screening. Finally, we will reject applicants who we do not have enough information on to conduct a reasonable assessment of their security status and ability to integrate. So if we don't have enough information on an applicant, they're not coming into Canada. If there are red flags on the individual and we can't confirm them, they're not coming into Canada. Remember, 50,000 or less, moratorium. Please share your comments tonight, but this is the NCA's national security part of our immigration plan for Canada. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know how we can improve what we're doing. We hope you enjoy this message. Please share it with Canadians so they have a fair, broad choice in 2019. I will be doing part 2 on cultural security Tuesday next week. I look forward to reading your comments tonight. Thank you.